Hi, everyone. My name's Amy Young. My son is Jack Young. He's turning 5 on Saturday. He, like all of your children, has a lot of disabilities going on. He's globally developmentally delayed. And so we have spent the last 5 years just trying to figure him out. And my background, I'm a special education teacher. I taught for about 15 years. And then since fall of last year, I've been a special needs advocate. So I've been helping other families who have special needs children sort of facilitate, or I help facilitate that special needs world. And what else about me? I have a daughter, she's 2.5. I live in Connecticut. In addition to being an advocate, I also tutor on the side. My husband, Kevin, who you all know from his financial advising talks. And yeah, so I'm going to tell you guys about this therapy. I'm going to share my screen with you. So, oops, sorry. So NAPA is a facility that, well, first of all, NAPA stands for Neurological and Physical Habilitation Center. The NAPA Center has 4 locations, 3 in the US and 1 in Australia. As you can see from this list, they offer a variety of therapies that I had never heard of before. I honestly don't, I put the website here. I'm not a therapist, so I don't want to speak on behalf of the specific therapeutic programs because I don't want to misspeak. But I put the link at the bottom of this slideshow and I'll send it to everybody if you want. You can just click right on it. It brings you right to the website and it goes through each of these specific therapies that are offered in NAPA. I'm going to speak to a few of them that I'm familiar with, but again, there's a lot of these here that Jack does not partake in, so I don't feel comfortable speaking about them. But the reason we found NAPA in the first place was about 2.5 years ago. Another Cat 6A family, Frankie's mom, Vera, she was posting videos of her son doing these incredible, I don't even know what to call it, incredible movements with different therapists. And I was very envious of her. And I thought, oh my gosh, how do I get this for my son? Oops, sorry, I have a typo on my slide. Sorry. But I messaged her on Instagram and she basically said, go to the NAPA Center. You have to check this out. There's one in Boston. It's near you. And so that's how I heard about it. Just word of mouth. None of my therapists here in Connecticut had ever heard of it. In fact, I feel like even today, when I mention it to anybody, nobody knows about it. So this is why we wanted to do this presentation, just to teach you that there is this amazing opportunity for you to send your child, if you choose to, that's really close to you. Or maybe close to you. So Jack did his first, so one thing I do want to speak to, so if you look at the third one down, it's called intensive therapy. Jack's done 4 intensive therapies. Sorry, I think I'm missing a slide. Okay, I was going to tell you about intensive therapy first. Okay, anyway, so intensive therapy is a 3-week-long session. And when you sign up to do this, you basically, you fill out a really long application online describing your child or family member, and you give NAPA basically everything and anything you have so that they can get a full read on who you're speaking of. And then they speak with their team and they recommend different therapies, different therapeutic program for your child or adult. An intensive, as I said, is 3 weeks long, and it can range anywhere from 2 hours a day to 6 hours a day of different therapies that were offered on my previous screen. So Jack started his first one in August 2019. He was 3.5 years old. And since then, we've done 3 more. We just finished one last week, actually just a couple days ago. And one thing I just wanted to, before I sort of jump into the specific therapies and Jack's experience there, a question that some of my friends have asked me here is, well, what do you do with, how do you make it work? Like, you're gone for 3 weeks. Boston is, I mean, it's only 3 hours from us, but that's still, it's not a day trip. So you really have to make a sacrifice. It's not easy. You have to rely on family and friends. We have my in-laws who live in California are amazing, and they've taken Jack for every time they go for a week with him. My husband will go, I'll go separately. My daughter Emma stays home. She's with childcare providers. I mean, it's, I won't lie, it's stressful. It's definitely stressful. But somehow you make it work, right? We want to do what's best for these kids. And we know that NAPA is something that's going to change Jack's life. So we're basically making any sacrifice we can to get him there. I've put, and again, I'll email this out, but I've put 2 places where my family has stayed, the Hyatt House and Waltham Landing Apartments. They're both great. I mean, it's nothing luxurious, but both of them are handicap accessible. You can get a suite, so you can have multiple people stay with you. One thing I noticed at the facility is there are many families who choose to just bring everybody with them. So one mom I was just with this past 3 weeks, she had her husband, her other child, her special needs child, and her au pair all living in one of the Waltham apartments. And they just took turns going to the clinic with their special needs child, and everyone else just stayed at home at the apartments. I think the husband was working from home. So they chose to just all move there together for 3 weeks. My family chooses not to do that. We choose just to do 1 week at a time, and we choose to come home on the weekends because we can, it's close enough. So there's a lot of different ways you can do it. Another big question I've had about is NAPA is cost. It's different for every family based on your insurance. So I can't really answer that. It just depends on what your insurance covers. So you would have to look at your plan. Some insurance companies cover it all. I had many people that I met this session that said, oh, it's covered 100%, 5 hours of therapy a day for 3 weeks. We don't pay anything. My family, we pay a lot. So it depends on your insurance. Oh, and they'll help you with that. The NAPA team will contact your insurance company, and they'll walk you through that. So it's very helpful. Okay, so Jack, when he goes to NAPA, he gets Neurosuit. One of his therapies is Neurosuit. Again, I put this quote here. It's directly from the website. I've also put a link here to the website specifically about NAPA Center. I can click on it. Can you guys see? Did it change screens? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is what the website looks like. As you can see, it'll give you a whole description of Neurosuit and what it does. Again, I'm not a therapist, so I don't want to speak to it, but I'll send this to you all. You can read about it. But one thing that I took away from, let me just go back to the other screen. Hello, hold on. Is that it was explained to me in layman's terms that basically, I guess the Neurosuits were originally created for astronauts who were coming back from space, who needed to reacclimate to like the center of gravity and feel their muscles move. And I don't know, there's a whole science behind it, but they started using it with special needs children who had trouble using their bodies correctly. So Jack, as you can see from the picture, Jack is in this Neurosuit. His program at NAPA, they've recommended 2 hours a day he's in this suit. I believe their recommendation is no less than 90 minutes at a time. So it's either an hour and a half or 2 hours that the child will be in this suit without taking it off. It takes about 10 minutes to get in it. So I think that's one of the reasons. And then basically he sees an OT and a PT in this suit, and they do different types of activities that you probably see if your children participate with an OT and a PT at home. The specific movements themselves are just what a regular PT or OT would do, but because he's in this suit, it helps with muscle memory, and he can feel his body moving more in the suit, and it triggers neurons. I don't know. Again, you should read about it on the website. But the theory is that when you get home from NAPA and you do these same exercises, not in a suit, your body will have an easier time doing them. And I can say from 4 sessions of going that they're not wrong. It's true. Jack went to PT today, not in a Neurosuit, and his physical therapist was very impressed with, he was wall walking, so he had his hands up on the wall and he was taking steps, he was sidestepping, and she said he hasn't been able to do this independently before, and he's doing it today. And that was one of the goals that the NAPA therapists were working on in the suit. So next, we have, if anyone has questions, you can interrupt me, or we can wait till the end. You can write them down. It's up to you. I will leave time at the end.
Amy, just a question. The Neurosuit, is it something that has like electrical impulses, or it's just like a regular suit?
It's a suit. As you can see from the picture, it's like a leather-based material, and then all those black things are bungee cords. And so when they attach them to the child, or when they put the suit on the child, there's a specific way they have to put the bungee cords on to make it so that when the child moves, they feel their muscles more. Again, I don't know how the science, I don't know the science behind it, but no, it's not electronic at all. Okay, so CME is another therapy that Jack gets when he is at NAPA. It's another recommended therapy. I will click here just so you can, it stands for Cuevas Medic Exercise, CME. And how it was described to me when I asked why CME, why is this so special? This quote kind of helps you picture. It's basically it's doing different exercises that is thinking outside the box, but the child, no matter their ability, is using their own muscles to get to the desired goal. So, for example, Jack at home typically wears AFOs, which if you're unfamiliar with that, it's basically like leg braces. And his therapists here all use them, and he wears them to school. But the therapist here, this is an occupational therapist, Therese, who's working with Jack. She's choosing not, as you can see, he's not wearing any braces. He just has his shoes on, because the theory is that they want the child or adult to feel the muscles moving from the bottom to the top without any help, because that's going to help strengthen the muscles even more, because you have to you're using your own skills. She's obviously holding him. If she were to let go, Jack would fall over, but you know, he's going, I took a still shot of a video. He picks his other leg up at one point to then step over. CME it can be a little scary to watch. I was always convinced Jack was going to fall on his face. You know, they're holding him by his ankles, and I have a child who can't stand independently, but somehow they don't fall. And I saw a lot of children, when you're at the facility, you have your own little area that you work in, but you get to know the other families. There's not many people allowed at a time. So I saw, you know, I think the youngest one was maybe 6 months old, and she was doing, I don't know, it was just, I encourage you to click on the link later on and just sort of explore CME a little more. It's a really unique therapy. And again, I've only found it in my neck of the woods, offered at NAPA. So there's no one around here that is trained in it. And then, so the intensive therapy, I thought this quote was really interesting. My husband said he knew this. I didn't know this until I found this quote yesterday. But many children gain more progress towards their goals in 3 weeks of intensive therapy that they do in a whole year of ongoing traditional therapy. I think that's a huge statement right there. And I wanted to show you some videos. So this is going to be Jack. This is just from this past intensive. I should say, at an intensive, the therapists meet the child in person on day 1. And on day 1 and day 2, they make a plan and they write goals. And then those goals are worked on for the next 13 days. And nothing changes. Same routine, same room, same equipment. It can look almost boring because you're like, why are you doing this over and over and over again? But there's a purpose for it, right? They want these new skills to stick. So in these 2 videos I'll show you, Jack is practicing kneeling to stand to then take a step. He's doing CME, so he doesn't have his braces on. He doesn't have a Neurosuit on. She's using in both videos, the therapist is using shelf liner. It's just a way, it's almost like just better material than a rope. But I want you to look at, in the first video, look at the placement of where that shelf liner is holding Jack, and look at, what he does, and then we can go on. Oops. So that was during week 1 of his past intensive. As you could see, she's holding him at his waist. So that provides more support for a child, right? Because it's at his core. So he's not having to work as hard because she's giving him a little more support. She can also change and vary the level of support by where her hands are on that shelf liner. If her hands are farther away from his body, that's obviously going to provide less support for him because it's more of like a loose belt. And if she has to hold kind of directly onto the shirt with the shelf liner, that would clearly provide more support. So in this last video, this was week 3 of his fast intensive, same skill. I missed the beginning part where he gets from his knees, but you'll get the gist. But just look at where the shelf liner is on his body this time, just 2 weeks later. Want to see if there we go. It's like, I swear he takes a step. Okay, so to the naked eye, you may be like, great, that's not that big of a deal. But the therapist explained to me that's a huge deal. The fact that she was able to have the shelf liner around his thighs as opposed to his waist in itself is a huge change. And the amount of support she needed to give him, she explained to me, to get him to eventually move those legs in the second video was a lot less than in the first video. Even though he did it faster in the first video, she was supporting him more. So it just shows that he's processing and he's thinking about what he has to do. So we were really proud of Jack there. So before Jack started NAPA 2.5 years ago now, almost 2.5 years ago, he was able to sit independently. He was able to weight bear through his feet. If you stood him in front of you, he would, he'd put weight down on his feet, but he would just sort of lean on you. He was able to move his legs in a walking pattern, but he needed a maximum level of support. So, we would be holding him and sort of just moving our own bodies, and he would kind of just follow, but he wasn't taking any initiative with his own steps. He was able to do some floor work transitions, but again, with a lot of support. And creep is just another name for crawl. He could do that as well, but again, with with maximum support. So this video I have here is from August of 2019. I think Karen and Chris, that's when he went, right? I think, yes, 2019. This was his first NAPA experience. And so you can see him here. So the next video, you're going to see what he can do now. So this is 2.5 years ago. I want to try to get it bigger for you. He's crying the whole time. Okay, so Therese definitely had to help him a lot. He was not happy about it. He cried for most of his sessions, but he was working on going from a quadruped to a half kneel to a stand. And then, oops, sorry. So now Jack, now again, I have to praise his therapists at home as well. You know, we've been working tirelessly around the clock with Jack on everything since his first NAPA experience. But now the list of things he can do is a lot larger. And even things that are the same type of goals, he's doing a little bit more independently. Our biggest excitement from this past NAPA experience was he actually took a step in the walker by himself without any, of course you missed it on video, right? You can never capture it in the moment, but I think I got somewhat of it on video, so I'm gonna press play for you, but he did do it in person. We were there watching him, and it was pretty amazing to see, you know, from that first video I showed you to this one. So. So that was at the end of not only that was the last day of his 3-week intensive, but it was also the last day of last minute of 4.5 hours of therapy. So it's pretty strong if you ask me. And that was his therapist, Jeffrey, had worked with him 2 sessions ago, last January. So he hadn't seen Jack in a year, and he was blown away by what Jack could do this January versus last January. Sorry. Yes, this is sort of another description of the intensive programs here and why they're so unique, and what they do. So these 3 videos I just thought would be sort of helpful for you to watch. It's from, obviously you can see the dates, spans over a year, and it's 3 different NAPA sessions. Jack's doing the same activities on a treadmill 3 times. But I just want you to see the level of support and what he's able to do from last January to this January. And again, this is not something that Jack's therapists at home work on. We don't have a treadmill at school. They don't have, I don't know, they just don't have one at school. So the only time Jack has done this specific exercise is at NAPA, these 3 dates. So the first is from a year ago. So that was the first time Jack had ever been on a treadmill. As you can see, it took 2 therapists to be with him. He was supported 100%. They're basically moving his legs for him. The treadmill is rolling, but they're taking step for him and step for him. He's also bungeed in, so if they were to let go, pretty much would be supported anyway. So that was like the maximum level of support you could have given him. Then we fast forward to August, this past summer. So so obviously that's a huge jump from January to August. But I did want you to notice, yes, there's only 1 therapist. Yes, you know, there's no bungees attached to him, but the therapist mainly was focusing on just getting him to get that pattern, that momentum going and moving his legs. She wasn't really focusing his hands. At one point in the video or in the session, he just took his hands off. He was, you know, flailing them about. A goal that we've had since August until now has been just Jack having more purposeful use of his hands and realizing that they're there for a reason. And so this next video from this past session is really great because you'll be able to see that he really is using his hands to do what she wants him to do. So a few things about that. As you can see, holding onto the green rope is a lot harder than holding onto a treadmill bar. It's a less, it's more static. It's thinner, it moves, it's a bungee cord, so it's not as firm for him to grasp onto it. It doesn't make him feel as secure. So the fact that he held onto it was a huge goal. That was actually my goal for him after 3 weeks. And I believe he hit it like week 2, day 1. Michaela is the therapist in the 3rd video. She's also the therapist in the 2nd video from August. She was explaining to me that although it looks the same, the level of support she was giving him at his hips was very different. In August, she had to hold on more tightly. She was sort of moving his hips to take the steps. But in January, a couple weeks ago, she was just she said she had like 2 fingers on at one point, and he was taking the steps by himself and balancing, using his core and grasping at the same time.
Amy, question.
Yes.
When she noticed that, was it towards the end of the therapy or towards the beginning of the therapy?
So this video from this past January was week 2. So she noticed it right in the middle of the intensive. And then since she noticed that, she would then do different things based on her knowledge. So like, I don't have everything on video, but at one point she took her hands away from his hips and she moved them down towards his knees. And so that gives him even less support. So once they realize what your child can do, they go with it and they try to change their technique.
The reason I'm asking the question is whatever they noticed back in August was probably towards the end of the therapy or mid of the therapy. So there was an improvement when he came back in January 21.
Mm-hmm.
And
yes.
Do you know the improvement was due to what? Were you doing these same therapy like over and over at home?
No. So I had mentioned we hadn't been on a treadmill since August with Jack. So the theory behind why he was able to accomplish such a great jump in progress is just all the interim therapy that we've been doing. And I'll get into that. NAPA gives you a home exercise program to work on.
I see. Okay.
Yeah. So, and I'll explain that. But no, Jack had not been on a treadmill. These 2 videos, those were the last 2 times he was on them.
Okay.
Sorry. Okay. So That's a nice segue, Emil. Okay, so another reason why NAPA is so great and so unique, and why I think everybody should go, is that it's not, yes, what they do, a lot of it can only be done at NAPA, and I understand that, but they have such a wonderful homeschool NAPA connection. Um, my son's team at school is amazing, and they don't fight back, they don't push back. They're really, really great with Jack. But I think the reason they've stepped up to the plate even more, and why I respect them even more as a therapy team, is that they truly listen to NAPA because they see it for what it is. So since Jack started going there in August of 2019, his school team is in constant contact with his NAPA team, and they work together to write Jack's IEP goals. Now, again, it can't be perfect. The school doesn't have a treadmill. The school doesn't have a Neurosuit. The school doesn't have CME, but the school can at least try to work on the goals themselves that NAPA was working on without all the fancy equipment. So, Emil, I think that's why Jack was able to accomplish something from August to January without having that specific equipment, but his school team was taking NAPA's goals and working with what they could in the school environment.
You know, the thing is with school, typically, like it's easy to do things whenever his weight is not a lot, is when someone can handle the weight of the child. Like my son Peter, for example, if he doesn't want to do something, I cannot force him. He's 110 pounds.
Right.
You know, but whenever you're handling a child who is like 30 pounds, even 40 pounds, it's easier to handle. That's why I think it's very important to get the child into this therapy as early in age as possible, because if you cannot get the child into these, it becomes way harder later on, to whenever the child becomes heavier.
Right. Obviously, yes, I'm a huge fan of early intervention. Earlier, the better. I wish I had known about this when Jack was an infant. But I will say that even children, I mean, again, you meet families at the clinic, you see other kids. It's there, you know, there's not much privacy once you're there. There are children who are in their teens that are 80 pounds that go, and yeah, they may fight the therapist, but this is what the therapists are trained to do. You know, they're not mom and dad. So these children who are fighting and screaming, they still get that work done. So I would say that if you're a family member or child or whoever you're here to think about, it could still be something that would be really beneficial for them, even if they're older. But you're right. Obviously, younger kids are easier to handle, to carry, to move. That's very true. Another thing I think that's great about NAPA, a lot of our kids with Cat 6A have CVI or other vision impairments. So what NAPA would do, I will say there's not a teacher of the visually impaired at NAPA. They also don't have that much training. So that's not their wheelhouse, right? So what I've done in the past for Jack is when I've noticed situations where I think, he'd be more successful if this were in place or if that were in place based on his vision impairments. My teacher of the visually impaired contacts the NAPA therapist and just gives them a rundown of all the accommodations she would recommend. They can't do everything. Again, they're not perfect, but they try. And they can also push back, you know, CME itself. If you notice from CME, that's probably the worst therapy for a child with visual impairments, because Jack's body is in free space. She's not having him hold on to anything. There's no walls on either side of him. I mean, his vision therapist had like a nervous breakdown watching CME because she was like, oh my gosh, this is horrible. But the CME therapist said, well, I understand your point of view, but my point of view is I'm trying to get this boy to feel his body and move his muscles. So there's a time and a place for everything. I've learned as a mom that it's not always going to be perfect, right? So you sort of give and take. Maybe Jack doesn't do CME next time. I don't know. I haven't thought about it yet, but they try to be as, you know, accommodating to the child, obviously, as they can be, but they still want to practice what they know and what they're best at.